What's up, AMP fam? I'm Destiny Cooper, an instructional specialist in East Baton Rouge Parish who works with Humanities AMPed. And today we're going to talk about how to design circle processes. Now, why are we talking about this today? Well, because I've talked with several principals and teachers who have been struggling with the idea of building a classroom culture in an online learning space. And some people believe it's really impossible to translate what we did in the classroom into an online space. And some people are just really struggling with getting students to participate. So, what we're going to do is explore how you can use circle processes either by designing a full circle or using pieces of a circle process within a lesson to increase engagement and connect students' experiences to what they are learning.
So let's jump in. Let's get amped up for the circle series. I'll ask you to grab something to write with and to write on before we get started. And you can either pause your video or open a new browser while it's running to type in this tiny URL so that you can access this circle template and other resources that we'll look at throughout the video today. So I'd like to preview the circle components before we start diving into the details. Each of these is included in the template and is a step in creating a full circle. So we're going to look at these in detail, but I also want you to know that you can use each of these components within existing lessons to increase engagement or achieve a specific purpose. You don't always have to structure a circle because circles can take 30 to 90 minutes. So as you go through this video, we're going to take a few minutes to pause and write throughout so that you can imagine how this can connect to your classroom and your students. Before you design your circle, you need to be clear about why you're doing your circle. What is your purpose? What is your topic? And then what title best matches that purpose and topic? Circles engage students in exploring a topic with curiosity and connecting experiences to that topic. So really, circles are very flexible. If you want to explore classroom culture, identify a specific issue and choose solving that issue as your circle topic. If you want to increase your students' confidence to take academic risks, make that your topic so that students can name barriers to confidence and generate strategies to increase confidence and grow academically. If you want to explore a unit question or a particular academic skill like analyzing a text or some other particular skill, make that your topic. If your kids have been testing for a large number of days and they just need to have some fun, you could maybe choose a social emotional skill, a collaborative building skill, or just get to know your students and have them get to know each other through these circle processes. These can be applied to anything. If you can imagine it, you can design it. And so now I'd like for you to pause the video and write. Think about topics and purposes that will work for your class. So pause the video now. When you're ready to return, we will move on to the next circle component. Now that you've brainstormed some topics and purposes, when you're ready to plan an actual circle, you can come back to this template and use this slide to introduce your circle to your students. After you introduce the circle, the next component is a mindfulness moment. This is a moment when we get settled into the circle by taking some deep breaths. You could find some breathing exercises or just ask students to take like 3 deep breaths with feet flat on the ground. And the reason we do this is to be fully present. And I often tell students here that circles honor our ancestors because people for centuries have sat in circles and learned from each other by either telling stories or sharing information. And that's what makes it a sacred space. And this really encourages students to participate because we feel like we're connecting our present to our past. After the mindfulness moment, we dedicate the circle and review the circle guidelines. And we do this every time we do a full circle. Sometimes the circle is dedicated to specific people or to general people like here, all those who dare to be brave. Typically, if I'm trying to increase student engagement, I tie the circle or dedicate the circle to bravery or courage. So the dedication is always tied to that topic and that purpose. These guidelines are always the same. We review these with the kids, and we let them know about the talking piece. A talking piece can be any object that is special to you or to one of the students, and whoever holds the talking piece is the only person who can talk in that moment. Now, of course, this gets a little complicated virtually. What I usually do is show students the talking piece, and then we pass an invisible talking piece to each other. However, you could invite students to bring their own talking pieces to the circle and demonstrate them, show them to the camera every time they're speaking. And that can encourage kids to turn cameras on because they might get excited about showing their talking piece to someone. Now, it's also really important to say that anyone can pass, and we always give those who pass a second chance if they want to speak. We want circles to be a low pressure environment, and that actually is what encourages students to speak. Often I'll give a class a challenge for 100% participation by the end of the circle, and 9 times out of 10 it works. It's very rare that I give that challenge with these guidelines and I don't get 100% participation. After introducing the circle purpose and breathing through the mindfulness moment, the dedication, and reviewing the circle guidelines, you will pose a check-in question. So check-in questions are low stakes and high interest, and these questions should be fun and easy to answer to get as many voices heard in the circle as possible. These questions build trust, and they are meant to have some fun. And you can choose whether or not they connect to academic content or even to the circle topic. Check-in questions can really just be fun if you want them to. Now that you know what check-in questions are, I would like for you to pause the video and write. When might you use check-in rounds in your class, even when you're not doing a full circle? Think about class openings or transitions, before or after some big event, test, or deadline. Pause and write and just think, when might you use some check-in questions in your class, even if you're not doing a circle? Now that you've explored some ways that you can use check-in rounds even when you're not doing a full circle, I'd like to give you a pro tip for when you are doing a full circle before we move on to the next thing. Especially when you're teaching in an online or a hybrid environment, I definitely suggest that you ask students to answer the check-in question in the chat. The reason is because this will establish the circle order without having any complications about establishing it ahead of time. Also, by creating it in the chat, everyone in the class can refer to it easily by scrolling up and seeing who comes before and who comes after them. Also, if someone gets kicked off, it's really easy to just copy the responses to the check-in round and repaste them in the chat so that anyone who got kicked off the internet can see the circle order before moving on. The next component of a circle are rounds. While check-in questions are meant for students to feel comfortable and ease into the circle, round questions ask students to explore the topic in order to achieve the purpose. Though rounds are often framed as questions, they can also be sentence starters, so you can use whatever structure works for you and your students. I want you to notice that this slide includes the challenge for 100% participation. When you create your own circle, put whatever challenge you have on every slide. I just highlighted it here. And again, these templates are available through the link in the tiny URL. But the rounds ask students to explore the topic and the purpose in a much deeper way. Sometimes you'll have 1 or 2 rounds. Sometimes you'll have 5 or 6 rounds. And it's okay if you have some students who are reluctant to speak. You can tell them that they can share what someone else has shared or echo what someone else has said. Because sometimes we really do disagree with each other, and sometimes kids just need a low-stakes way to enter a conversation. So just know that that's okay. Now, sometimes rounds need more context. Depending on your circle purpose and your circle topic, you might want to include a text to connect the round questions to. For example, if you want to help your students become better at taking academic risks or become better at taking risk to participate in class or to be brave, you might read something like the Brave Space poem. We do this very often in Humanities Amped. There is a slide deck that goes with the Brave Space Circle in the tinyURL folder that you can look at for examples of check-in questions, for round questions, and round questions that go with dialogue, much like this. We typically ask 3 layers of questions when we use a text for dialogue in a circle. What stands out to you? How have you seen or experienced the ideas in this text? And then a future question. Now that we have this knowledge, what is next? So for this one, it might be, how can we make this class a brave space? If you were asking students to take more academic risks, you might say, how can we be brave learners? Or what can we do differently to be more brave or to learn more? After digging deeply into a text, you might need to engage students in a few more rounds that delve even deeper into the topic. But be aware that you can choose the structures that work for you. So what I mean here is, don't add rounds you don't need. Keep it focused in a way that achieves your purpose. You want to keep all of your rounds and all of your activities in your circle related to your topic and your purpose. Sometimes you need later rounds, sometimes you don't. So just be aware of that as you're designing your own circles. Once your rounds are done, before moving on to the closing, very often we need to ask for consensus or next steps. In other words, if your purpose is to increase your students' ability to take academic risks, then if we don't identify the clear next steps and reach agreement around how the class or individuals are going to support each other in carrying out those next steps, then we're probably not going to be successful. So this step is almost always crucial, but not quite always. If you're doing a circle for fun, or if you're doing a low stakes community building circle, typically you don't need this, but pretty much all other circles will have at least either a next steps slide, sometimes consensus also. And so consensus is important particularly when you're community building or try to shift some behaviors in the class, because it creates an agreement that everyone has said, I will follow through with this. And that allows everyone in the community to share responsibility for accountability as people do or do not follow through with those next steps. It also creates ability to celebrate. If the class reaches their goal, if they design these next steps and they reach consensus around it and they hold each other accountable and achieve it, then you could have a celebration circle or a day of games. You can set up reward systems through these circle processes to reinforce that positive behavior and those positive shifts in your students. Right after we do the closing round next, I'm going to show you the resources in the tinyURL that correspond with these slides. For example, I have a document that will show you how to reach consensus. We'll also look at some particular resources for creating key components of a circle. But once you're done with consensus and next steps, you're going to close the circle. This is usually a short round, also low stakes, and it usually ties to the experience of the circle. It could be something that people learned, something that they're grateful for. It could be just their experience. And this is key because it puts an end to the process. It closes the sacred space. It marks a ritual and a routine. And by doing this, kids know what to expect, and it creates a safe space for them to be brave in and take those risks that we want them to take. So now we're going to explore the resources that are in the folder that you can access through your tinyURL. This circle is a model that incorporates academic skills. So this particular circle, I modeled this lesson in a class for a teacher, and I will be using that video to create future PDs for this series. But I want you to see that it's got many of the exact same components that we looked at throughout the video, including a check-in round, asking kids to put the check-in response into the chat, going through a few rounds, and connecting the content of the circle to academic content. Um, we explored what makes a hero, looking in ourselves, looking to other people, looking at an epic hero, and then students had a few minutes to quick write an argument. This was just a way to quickly practice this skill so that we could give them some feedback on a low stakes assignment. And then you can see the closing round here. If you're not looking to do an academic skill, maybe you're looking to build class culture, I would highly suggest adapting, either using the circle as is or adapting it to your particular needs. This is the Brave Space circle. It goes through the poem. Again, it's got the check-in round, several rounds, same questions that we saw with this poem in the video. And then it takes students through generating a list of values, which you can then use to generate a list of norms. And speaking of norms, this process can contribute greatly to a positive class culture. It's a democratic process for norms and consensus. And this is a guide that tells you, why do we use norms and consensus? When do we do this? What are they? And how do we reach consensus? So in case you forget, need some details, you can look right in here for that specific targeted skill. And then finally, if you want to explore more resources for circles, you can come to the AMP Facilitator's Guide to Online Engagement. The table of contents is hyperlinked here. So today we looked at circle processes. So I would suggest that you go to that hyperlink. As you create your circle, this can help you be really grounded in what you're doing and why, remembering what the steps are. You can use this in tandem with the video or just this, whatever your learning style is. Down here, there's a treasure trove of resources to some external websites that can help you design your circles. I definitely suggest exploring this. This is largely how I learned to do circles before I had training. I found this guide and I practiced with different circles in here. So you could just go through it and look. A lot of the circles that we did connect to these here. All right, and you can look through that for the lesson. Here's some actual circle lessons. Loving the question circle is really great, and I'm going to cover this one later in the series too. So have fun exploring, fam. Take your time, look through it. I'm going to have some office hours set up, so if you create a circle or have questions about a circle, I hope you join me. Have a great day and a great week, and stay amped up, y'all.